Frank Romo, the founder and CEO of RomoGIS. It is an absolutely huge privilege to have you on the Geospatial Index.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is great. We recently got connected, and I know we're both eager to jump on and talk.
Yeah, I love the spontaneity and the fact that you are humble and eager enough to help out the geospatial community by taking the time. So thanks. All right, so then what's the elevator pitch for RomoGIS?
Well, at RomoGIS, we focus on using geospatial technology and technology at large for community impact, social change. I have a background as a community organizer, activist, and so when I put RomoGIS together, it's really focused on empowering communities, empowering students, empowering residents, moms, dads, cousins, no matter who it might be, right? Everybody's a member of the community and everybody has something to contribute. And our goal is to try to figure out how we can use our expertise and resources to contribute to community goals and strategy and empowerment, and do that in conjunction with our partners, nonprofit organizations. We work with cities, we work with different levels of constituents. And at the end of the day, it's really just about bringing our expertise from a geospatial standpoint, from a community organizing standpoint, to try to create local change.
Awesome. So I'm sensing a theme of geospatial for upward social mobility. Am I right in defining that as the niche you're dominating, or have you got any other comments about the niche?
I think that's one of the niches, I guess. For us, one of the things is that we do a lot of stuff, and I can't tell you how many times I'm told, well, wait, you do that too, or what? How does that fit in? And I think for us, it's about a comprehensive model. When I was organizing, that's how we learned how to organize. Not one tactic is going to be able to help communities gain more power, gain more access. Again, we wrestle with things like access to food resources, public safety, public health. These are things that are important to everybody, and if they were able to be solved by a singular solution, then they would have been solved by now. And that's not the way things are. So understanding that there's a comprehensive model here, yes, geospatial for upward mobility in terms of entrepreneurship, but also, yes, geospatial for education, for spatial awareness and community impact, but also geospatial for development of greater connections to the intersectionality that is the cities and the urban areas that we work in. For instance, just a real quick comment, right? One of our recent examples is working in the Bronx. And when we were working in the Bronx, we are advocating for more spaces for students, more public areas so they can congregate and hang out and those kind of things. And so when we approach it through that lens, we understand how something like parks is a meaningful, libraries, municipal buildings, how those things are actually meaningful gathering places for people. And so understanding that it might be about GIS, but it's also just about community development.
What is community organizing?
That's a great question. And I think, there's, for me, growing up, that was being able to coordinate community stakeholders for a shared goal, purpose, or interest. That's what it is to me. And so a lot of these interests are different. For some communities, it's about food security. For some communities, it's about access to transportation. But it's about understanding who those stakeholders are and what are their needs. And when we are able to understand those two things, we're able to facilitate potential change and leadership from those community leaders and those community assets. And for me, again, you could talk about it as community development. I have a background as an urban planner. So, yes, some of our stuff happens when we talk about transportation. Well, I guess that's urban planning. But I think, there's a lot of times when we talk about urban planning or real estate development, there's this top-down approach where we're talking about community development or community organizing. It is this integration of this grassroots kind of community aspect, community outreach. What is actually how are people actually being impacted on the ground? How do they feel? And how do they see their futures changing or happening? And not as much being acted upon from the forces like urban planning or things like that.
Okay, so I guess I have a real world example. My wife is from Serbia. There is a animal rendering plant in a town nearby where she lives. This is a slightly horrific factory where, animal carcasses are converted into tallow and other products like lard and things like that. Needless to say, the smell is horrific. And the stench essentially overwhelms a nearby town about three kilometers away, just over 2 miles away, when they turn on the factory. And I used the Ushahidi platform to basically stand up a simple way for the community to report locations of the smell. And I've got ideas how to take that point data and turn it into like a compass rose around the town or the factory to show over time where the smell occurs and proximity and things like that. So needless to say, there's a massive community impact, and also that retail and other businesses like cafes are hugely affected in that town. So is that kind of an example of how geospatial can be used for community organizing?
That's a great example, because in that example you have a specific location that is let's say in this case, right, you have the smell, but if there was another kind of pollutant or something like that, there's an effect. Everything happens somewhere, and so when something is happening and there's excess runoff or anything like that, that affects everybody in the neighborhood. And so again, from an organizing standpoint, I think what you're doing is bringing the technical side of it, and then the other piece would be to bring the community stakeholders to the table and understand
Exactly.
what their needs are and how we can address this issue, that shared community interest.
Okay, well, yeah, there's so many ways that this discussion is just perfect timing. So yeah, it sets things up for me to listen carefully to the rest of this conversation, or at least the answers you give. So yeah, all right. So then moving on, what's the skin in the game of owner, management, and staff of RomoGIS?
So for me, we're pretty lean. We have a lot of community partners that we work with, but our core team is about 10 folks. I'm the CEO. We have a few project managers that are trained in our model for RomoGIS of how to engage community, how to work with community or community organizations, nonprofits. We do a lot of work in the K through 12 space as well. So anybody who works with us, we try to train them in our model and make sure that as they get deployed to the community, that they know what our philosophy is and kind of what values we bring into the community to ensure that we are operating in a way that is equitable, in a way that is focused on elevating the voices in that community, and not focused on what we want to be done, but rather working in collaboration with those community leaders. So that's kind of our structure. Our program managers, our project managers take on their own specific projects, because we work also all across the country. And for me, I'm traveling a lot, doing a lot of
Seen
training,
that.
doing a lot of training, doing a lot of just kind of popping in and saying, "Hey, how's it going? Where are the things that we've worked on, and how do we follow up? And what can I be? How can I be utilized as a resource this time while I'm here?" Sometimes it's teaching, sometimes it's taking meetings, sometimes it's walking on the streets and collecting data. It looks different, but it's about being invested in those communities.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm getting the message that your ideal customer might be a school. Am I wrong?
Again, it depends on what kind of service we're looking at, right? For us, when we're talking, the schools are a very important aspect of any community, right? Because there's a way that they're getting access to youth, they're helping them through educational development. Those youth take those ideas and stories and experiences home with them, which then help compel the rest of the neighborhood or their family unit, whatever that might look like. And so the schools is one aspect in which we focus on educational development, entrepreneurship, and STEM education. And that way we are able to provide students access to that potential opportunity for upward mobility through the STEM education programs, because we know that there's lots of jobs coming online for geospatial, for tech at large. Again, I'm not just focused on geospatial. We do full stack development. So there's a bunch of different things, right? Web development, UX designer, whatever it might be. And whenever we work with students, we try to plug them into wherever it sees fit. We start in GIS, but we also recognize that it's not going to be a tool that everybody's going to want to use. But somebody might be highly interested in something else like AI or drone technology or whatever it might be. So we open with the geospatial piece, and we really try to help students navigate through that STEM career pathway. That's one piece. The other group that I think is a real common clients of ours are nonprofit or community based organizations who have a want to tackle issues in their community, but they might not have the technical resources or the technical education on how to do that, right? I've heard so many times, oh, we have lots of data, but we don't know what to do with it. That's a perfect example where an organization knows there's the value of data. They know the value of the stories and the information that they've collected through their hours of community engagement, but they want to understand how to get to that next level. How do we visualize that? How do we analyze that? And that's what we help a lot of organizations do: stand up their technical infrastructure, do a little bit of community strategy, and be able to execute on those things so they can move the ball forward on whatever topic it is that they're trying to address.
Okay, excellent. So then how fast and sticky is growth?
What do you mean by sticky? What does that mean?
Recurring customers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think it's right now it's really great because we have organizations who have come back to us to do new projects and develop new applications. But one of the things that we do is focus on capacity building. And so for capacity building, as a community organizer, somebody who's working to support communities to become more self-sufficient, it's important to me to ensure that some of those organizations can do this work themselves after they've engaged with us, right? That is how, to me, that was how I was trained as a mark of a good organizer. I think you could even say, a good leader, to ensure that folks can fish for themselves. Folks can then also inspire others to do the same thing, right? That is how you build change. That's how you build ecosystems. That's how you build organizations. And so we really focus on empowering students, community organizations, whatever it might be, to get interested in that work. If they want to proceed on a certain route, we try to help them go down that route. And sometimes we're not even the best organization for that. But if we can plug them in with another organization who does that work, now we're creating community ties and community connections that ripple throughout the neighborhood or throughout the organization. And so, again, we see ourselves there as that facilitator. And so we definitely have some recurring customers, and we have some customers that we've kind of sent on their way, and they're still send me a map every now and then. Hey Frank, look what we just did. Fantastic. I support you.
Awesome.
And they all know that I'm here, and they can, it's that relationship piece. They know that they can hit me up and have a conversation about something if they wanted to.
I love that in response to my question, you have selflessly focused on the growth of those that you have trained. Um, so just to bring you back to the growth of I love again that was the way you chose to answer the question, but it's also important, I think, for those listening who want to learn and perhaps stand up a similar business to understand the potential of this. So how about the growth in terms of new states or cities or
Mm.
schools that are perhaps reaching out to you in response to the promotional materials you're putting out on LinkedIn, showing the latest workshop success?
Okay, so yes, this year, our main program has been in collaboration with so many other great partners in Detroit, Michigan. We have other partners there, so it's not just us operating there. I think that's important to acknowledge that, again, we do this in collaboration with so many other great leaders. We have since recently expanded to New York, where we're doing a lot of work with multiple organizations in the Bronx. We are running a 5-week curriculum in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, with the Central Magnet School, where we have our GIS for Good curriculum being launched, and that's really exciting. Teaching students how to use geospatial for community change. Next year, we have some stuff in California and Las Vegas also scheduled, and so we're just bouncing around. And
So those are new locations?
those are it.
I
So
don't mean to grill you here.
no, it's fine. It's fine. So, like, again, if we want to talk about a place like Tennessee, there's like 3 cities that we've been working in, right? And in New York, we're in the Bronx, but then I'm also in Brooklyn a little bit. And so in California, it's Los Angeles, but it's also the Central Valley. In Las Vegas, right now it is in Las Vegas. That's the city. But
Yeah.
here's the thing: is what happens is when you see this kind of work happening, there's a lot of growth that happens by word of mouth. And
Yeah.
so, in particular, the work that we've done in the Bronx, we started off with a few community events, gun violence reduction workshop that we were part of, that was
Love it.
in conjunction with the Angela Yambo Foundation. We did some work at the YMCA where we provided a community mapping workshop. And since then, we've taught at 2 different school locations, Family Life Charter Academy School, Family Life Academy Charter School
Yep, yep.
in the Bronx. And we did work with one group of fourth and fifth graders. They called up the other school and were like, "Hey, y'all should look into this."
Yeah.
And
There
again,
we
for
go.
me, that's a victory all the way around, because yes, we get to participate with more organizations, we get to do more of what we do, but now there are over 100 students in the Bronx that we've already trained. And so
Yeah.
that's, again, how we build that community force.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Grilling over.
No, it's great. It's all good, man. It's all good.
No, it's a really serious force for community change here. So I personally would like to learn, and that others learn about the potential here through this conversation. All right. So then, what are some examples of work you have done in the K to 12 education, and what's the youngest drone pilot you've trained?
So for the K through 12 education, I think one of the things that has been one of the best parts about being on the road so much is that I learned so much while being on the road. I will learn so much while working with different communities, working with different age groups, and it's all still very much a learning process, and it helps me refine how we approach communities, how we approach our curriculum building, how we approach our partnerships, etc. So in the K through 12 space, we've most recently, like I said, in the Bronx, have worked with 4th through 6th graders on our community mapping workshops, which help them identify very basic map features, like, what's a landmark, how do we when we're drawing a map, what does it look like to have a different line weight, why do we use different certain colors, real basic kind of a little cartography kind of mapping stuff. But it's this idea of place-based learning, helping them understand more, help them be able to visualize what they understand about their community, because they already understand a lot about their community. And so when you have them visualize what it looks like to travel to and from school, or what it looks like to walk home from school, that gives us a different perspective of what they're actually
Yeah.
experiencing in the community. And so that's 4th through 6th graders. We did that recently in the Bronx, and then we're doing working with high schoolers in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and of course our program in Detroit, Michigan. We're working with high schoolers, which focuses on geospatial for good in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and in Detroit, Michigan. It's a fully like built out program, again thanks to our partners in the schools there. Shout out Chad. Chad Seegers, he's doing a phenomenal job of leading our young men there, and all the other partners that we have. That program is focused on college education credits. That
Yep.
program is focused on getting students to get their drone pilot license. So for me, I'm still learning more on the drone piece, right? There's
Yep.
stuff that I can teach on that. Then there's points where I'm like, all right, I'm not quite sure I'm the right guy there, but we have our resources and other pieces there. And I think when it comes down to organizing or building community, that's a big part of it, is understanding where your strengths are and where your blind spots are, and then being able to put yourself in collaboration and connection with people who fill those needs, because then we're able to fill those needs all the way around for our clients and our constituents.
So I can't help but feel like, if I was in grade 9 and I had the chance to learn how to fly a drone, I would be completely sold on geospatial as the career for the rest of my life. So is it a huge draw card for youngsters?
It is. It is. It definitely is. It's the fun and cool thing to do. No matter where we go and we talk about it, you see people. Oh, what you know? We can fly a drone, and I think it's that. It's a very. Here's the other piece: is that the students nowadays, they're so technically savvy, just kind of intuitively. This is how you push this button. And I always tell them the drone controllers. It's like a PlayStation controller or something that they've had in their hands before, and so a lot of them really take to it really easily as well. So then it becomes, the harder part becomes about, that's great, we're excited about that, but how do we get folks ready to pass the test? How do we get folks ready to get piped into the professional ecosystem? And that's where we focus on professional development, doing resume building, career workshops, those kind of things, because that's the harder part. You need more iteration on that with young students.
Sure. So sorry to press you on this, but is it grade 9 they get to get their hands on drone, or they have to be
Uh,
older?
so for the we do a lot of with indoor drones, so that students can mess around with those and kind of get the hang of it, of being on the sticks and stuff like that. 9th through 12th graders at the Detroit program, the Frederick Douglass Academy at Northern, that program, 9th through 12th grade, they definitely get exposure to it, but they'll be taking more 10th, 11th, 12th grade, right?
Yeah.
Kind of that route, because
Okay.
we want them to get that foundation to GIS and geospatial, but they're around it nonetheless, right? Again, Chad is the main program lead there, and he's ensuring that they have access to these tools when folks come in. Some of our partners bring drones, those kind of things. Those are the still moments of exposure that really do get students excited.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
it's about, one of the things I will say, it's about that continuous like handoff of the baton, because whether I'm working with students in Detroit or working with community organizations in the Bronx or in the Central Valley in California, it's this baton relay that is really where when we miss opportunity or miss a step, that kind of sets us back on the organizing path or the trajectory. And so we have to kind of make sure that we're continuing to help students, help communities matriculate. And that requires, that attention to detail, that care, that understanding of the community, and be able to do more where you see those gaps. And I think that's one of the things that we require of our team, is to try to go above and beyond to fill those gaps and be invested in the community enough to know where those are and understand their perspective to a degree. So we kind of, okay, I know what you're thinking. I see where you're coming from. We want to be able to be on that same page, because that helps us facilitate what we need to do.
Okay. Yeah, I really love you always coming back to the broader picture of what community organizing is like, and that it fits within that framework. Yeah, appreciate the training. Okay, so what about some examples in community engagement and organizing? How does GIS give people access to power? And I so appreciated you using exactly that phrase in one of the slides you had. I don't know if you want to bring it up, perhaps.
I shall. Give it one sec. Here we go. Already heard me talk about this, right? It's about this. Everybody likes to focus on the technology. Oh, it's so cool. It's fascinating. Everybody wants to talk about the data. Oh, we need access to data. We have so much data, but we always have to bring it back to the people. And because that's where the real power lies, is with people. And so that's, again, my organizing background, kind of my philosophy, understanding that that's really where the power lies. And in order to do that, we need to train folks to be able to utilize the data, the technology, the critical thinking to actually make that impact. This is a quote from me. I've said this before many times because I know it's true. That power limits access to data because data is powerful. And again, for me, the reason why I'm involved in geospatial is because it is about power for me. It is about ensuring that the communities that have been disenfranchised from somebody drawing a line on a map don't remain that way. And when the communities have been disenfranchised from not having all the information about that plant or that facility that's going in next door, when they
I,
do have access to that data, they can do more about it.
I started smiling and shaking my head there because I have known that ever since I began my first geospatial job for a gas pipeline. Well, it was doubling the size of a gas field and putting in a 400-kilometer long transmission line for a methane gas. And I have just seen that I've gone from job to job, from massive engineering consultancy to massive engineering consultancy, serving some of the richest companies as clients in any community, and essentially leveraging the power of geospatial on behalf of these billion-dollar organizations. So it's so nice to hear you so straightforwardly speaking about this. And this is about how our discipline can offer power in other directions.
I think I know I love it because you do. No matter how or what you're working in GIS, my question whenever I teach my workshops is, okay, who has access to the data? Why do they? If you don't have access to the data, why don't you? Who doesn't want you to have access to the data? Who benefits from having access to the data? Right? It's just all these questions, but it's all underlying this messaging that data is power, technology is power, and too many times I've seen communities of color, lower income communities, not have access when that page turns, when there's new technology, when there's new opportunities. And that's not what we're going to allow happen. We want to make sure that folks are plugged into folks that are underserved. Even as we work out in Tennessee, in rural communities, everybody wants to have access to these tools, and people's lives can be improved by having access to these tools and this data and this education. And I think one of the things that we do is help the communities and the students that are already there become aware of their own power, right? That's part of it as an organizer. Is not, I'm not giving them, we can have access to it through a collectively, but I'm not handing them anything. It's about really helping them understand the power that lies with their perspective, their experience, their ability to tell the story. Because a lot of times that's what needs to happen, is to be able to tell a story from the community perspective, from the first person perspective. As I tell folks when I come into communities, or even all the way back when I was training firefighters and EMS folks at my job in the 911 center at the city of Detroit, I always told them, I said, you guys know how to do this better than I do. I could just show you, let me show you how to push the tools and do X, Y, or Z. But it's not about that. It's about the thinking that underlies it, right? You're out in the field, you know what's going on. So when you see something on a map, you're going to know something completely different than I do, because I don't know that neighborhood or that block. And that comes down to the exact same thing when we're talking about working in the Bronx, when we're talking about working in Detroit, when we're talking about working in Las Vegas. It's about empowering those perspectives that too oftentimes go unheard, and actually have some of the uh, ideas to actually change that community. So that's great. We have the ideas, but unfortunately, sometimes that's not enough. We still need access to power.
There is immense unspoken power in a map. As soon as something is on a map, its existence and validity is acknowledged implicitly. I have an example of this from when I was a volunteer for Engineers Without Borders Australia. In Cambodia, I was at a local non-government organization called Samakum Ting Tanaut, which was an advocate for people living in urban poor communities. And one thing that we did for, I think it was about 10 of these communities, was we got all of the footprints of the houses that they lived in, and we put them all, those footprints, along the streets or the alleyways or wherever in Phnom Penh, the capital city. We put them all on OpenStreetMap. And then we put the name of each of those communities that had been given, to those communities by the people living there. We put that in OpenStreetMap as well. And it was just, you wouldn't think it would be much, but as soon as we put them on that map amongst all the other, like the street hierarchy, the supermarket locations, everything else, suddenly the validity of those communities was equal to everything else on the map. It's incredible. Uh, it's as though regular folk live in awe of the map.
They do. They definitely do. And I think that's one of my favorite things to do, is when I walk in a community and I showcase a map that I've made, they're like, "Oh, wow, this is amazing." And then I'm like, "All right, now it's your turn." And there's this moment where like, "Oh, what do you mean? That's way, I'm not sure I can do that." I'm like, "No, we got this. Like, we can do this." And supporting them and watching, whether it's, a high school student or organization who is fighting for justice in their neighborhood, who may have some technical acumen, may not have some technical acumen, building a map. When they do that, again, there's a sense of accomplishment. There's a sense of pride when they're talking about your neighborhood. When you want to make an impact and have some agency in your neighborhood or in your community, when you know that you have a tool that you can use that makes you feel more powerful as a person, as a contributor to your neighborhood or community, it really does help get you to a point where you can see yourself as an actor. And I think that's what we really try to do, is help folks understand how they can act and express their agency in their community at the individual scale as well as at the collective scale.
Again, I just love the words you're using. Agency is such another incredibly vital word. It's hard to put this into words, but it can be incredibly condescending to assume that someone, for example, from an urban poor community, has no agency, and that they require the heroic assistance of some powerful, privileged, high status outsider. So I really appreciate your emphasis on recognizing, celebrating, uncovering, and leveraging their agency. And it's just great that could happen via maps. And I can't help but feel like it's somehow appropriate, the t-shirt that I'm wearing.
I love it. I saw that T-shirt. I saw that T-shirt. I was like, "Yo, I dig it. I dig it." This is one of our. I just want to share this. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was. We've trained thousands of people across the country. And this was a program that we ran in California, alongside Hope and Heal Fund, one of our partners, working on gun violence reduction in the state of California. Here are some organizations that were learning through our 5-week program that we designed to train them how to use geospatial for mapping in their neighborhoods. And one of the big pieces that we really focus on, again, whether it's fourth graders, the other week I had the fourth graders presenting their maps, and I had a little microphone, and I was like, "Hey, can tell me your name and tell me about your map." I felt like I was like a game show host up there.
Yeah.
I was doing that, but the point is, here again, you see people presenting, whether it's the fourth graders or an organization who's done this for years and knows how to give presentations. It's about that voice too, because I think community voice, that personal voice, is part of that confidence building, is part of that power building, and it is what brings that perspective out of what's actually going on in the community and what that person's perspective is on their neighborhood. And so one of the things we really focus on is the communicating what is on the map, because we can make all the pretty maps all day, but if we can't communicate that to the appropriate stakeholders, then we're not going to get their buy-in to make this change. And at the end of the day, when you talk about the broad picture, that's usually the goal. What is the change that we're trying to make? So if we cannot communicate what this tool did, then this tool is useless.
Yeah. Yep. All right. This is, a nice tutorial. Okay. So regarding capacity building and app development, have you done any of this beyond the US, such as India?
Yeah, so we were
Leading question.
yeah. So in India, in Rio de Janeiro, and then we did some work in Paris, France as well. So like, yeah, we've done some work across the world. I would like to do some more international work. I really enjoyed the work that we did in India. We were working alongside one of my main developers. His name is Malcolm. He's a great guy. He helped along with us while we were at the University of Michigan. And when we were at the University of Michigan, we collaborated with them and the Indian Institute for Human Settlements and looked at creating a geospatial application to track transactions in the Bangalore real estate market, because we saw that there was some, we'll go with lack of transparency from the governmental agencies that were trying to take land through eminent domain. And I think, that's, again, classic kind of
Always
tale.
a source of controversy in any society.
Right, right. Tale as old as time. Like, that's just, well, we need this. Sorry you were here. Here's, maybe we'll give you something, maybe not, but either way, you got to go. That's again, and this is the dire situation when we're talking about organizing. One of the things is that unfortunately, a lot of times we're fighting against something, right? Where we're kind of have our backs against the wall when we're trying to make change. And I think one of the models that we're really trying to implement across the country, and then work we'll do, I'll come back to the India work right now, but one of the models that we're trying to do is really ensure that this can be a more proactive approach. How do we map and have data and make sure everybody's data literate? And when we have a community that is more data literate, that has access to these tools, that knows about the data and how to visualize it and communicate it, we're having completely different conversations at the community meetings, and we're having different conversations when we're talking to politicians. And I think there's also something in there where we're trying to build towards. So when we were in India, we were building an application, kind of a real estate application, to monitor all of the different pricing that was available for that building. There was a government price, there was an appraised value price, there was a private price, and it couldn't make sense of
The usual questions around unfair compensation for relocation, it sounds like exactly the same theme that Samakum Tiangtanat was advocating about in Phnom Penh.
Absolutely, and again, like I said, it's very, unfortunately, very common. And without that data or access to it, folks didn't have a way to tell the government, well, this is actually this is unfair, because somebody, a few blocks away got compensated from a private sale for this. Well, you're telling me that my land, when it's sold to you as the government, is actually X amount cheaper. That doesn't make sense to me. And so what we did is worked with Indian Institute for Human Settlements and some of their researchers. I did some training over there on GIS, and we built an application, handed it off to some researchers over there to continue their analysis of their local market. And again, there you see that collaboration and this kind of giving up of ownership of that work, because it was never ours in the first place, right? That was work that is doing work in conjunction with that research organization who has a a stake in the game, and they're going to bring a different perspective. They're going to probably bring a little bit more veracity. They're going to bring a little bit more pride and energy to it. And that's what we try to inspire, right? Those folks who are already local leaders, where
Yeah.
we can inspire and support them. That's the best way for us to create change.
Yeah, that was an emphasis in Engineers Without Borders Australia's capacity building approach, that the worst thing possible is to land as a bunch of aliens from outer space with your set of values, build a 20-story tall skyscraper, and then leave without telling anybody how to maintain it, or even that it has lifts and you have to press the buttons to make the lifts work, if you know what I mean. Okay, so you're very sensitive to and respond to local needs, and the work is directed by those. Yeah. Okay, so we are 2 questions away from the end, but the responses so far have triggered another one. I'll insert it here. When you were talking about K to 12 education, and examples of work there, you mentioned young men. So what is the impact on young men of your work?
So the program in Detroit, Michigan is Frederick Douglass Academy at Northern, and is a all male school in the city of Detroit. And so for me, I am, I've always been a big mentor and, kind of big brother, those kind of things. And,
I get the vibe.
for
I
sure, man.
love the whole outfit, man.
I
You
appreciate it.
look
I
very
appreciate
approachable. I love the pictures of you in classrooms. I can imagine you get some interest from the kids in
Yeah.
a
And
way that someone who's dressed differently and different as more professional, I hesitate to use that word, stuffy appearance may not generate the same engagement.
no, that's 100% right, man. That's 100% right, because I was in the Bronx and we were walking and we're drawing our maps, and Scott and I are walking. Who has any questions? Or is this question like, wait, are those LeBrons? What are you wearing on the feet? What are those? I need some of those. And I'm just like, does anybody have any questions about the map? but it's okay, right? Because that's a way for students and community members to be
Damn
seen
right.
when they see themselves in you, when they see that they
Damn
can
right.
relate. That's exactly how you get to those more direct, more intimate conversations about what's really going on here. And so in Detroit, we had definitely have a very strong family there, I would say, with the community that we built with the young men there. And, in less than a week or so, I'll be presenting with one of our former graduates there, who is now currently an analyst with RomoGIS, DeAnthony Neal. Shout out DeAnthony. What's up? I'm just gonna go as we go through. I'm just saying what's up to everybody. So, but he and I are going to be presenting in a week, and we're going to showcase not only his growth, his work, his contributions to our business, but also how that is exactly the kind of model that we want to employ, where we can employ folks, we can provide access to additional education or entrepreneurial opportunities. It's not just with us. Again, we have many other partners that we work with, OHM advisors up in Detroit and other folks, that when students are ready, when constituents want to take that next step, if they do want to go into geospatial, drone technology, whatever it might be, we want to be able to partner them with folks who share kind of our similar philosophy, who understand how to work with community members, but also who can provide them that next step into that new direction. When you're going into a new field, it could be kind of scary, or something, and when you have folks looking out for you, who just say, hey, maybe you should go this way, maybe you should go that way. It's those little moments that really help make people's careers. Like, oh, I'm gonna go do this now. I really want to do that. And that's what we love to see, is when we're able to do that and see that happen. Because with that, we also instill folks to give back and say, hey, you got to bring somebody else with you too. Like, this ain't just, we didn't just do this for you. Like, you got to pass it on. And I think so many of the folks like DeAnthony, like some of the young men we work with in Detroit, and have graduated, because our program there has been running for 4 years now. And so we've seen kind of that growth and that process and that turnover. And so each year it's new, where we have a whole new group of students to work with and build up. And, as we go back and forth to the Bronx and other places as well, we see that connection that we're building with not just the young men, but all of the students, but also the teachers too. I think one of the things that's really important is when we work with teachers or we work with community leaders, when they see that relationship being built with their students or their other constituents, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to work with you again. We want you to come back. And that's, for me to be invited back, right? You asked about like, what is it about how many recurring customers we have?
Yeah.
I,
Stickiness.
I think a better measurable is how often do we get invited to come back?
Sure.
Because it's their neighborhood, right? It's their community. So when we're invited to come back, that's
Right.
a victory.
Yep. Yep. I want to continue the theme of young men, and I want to read a quote from a relatively famous young man and community organizer. Let me get to the quote. The young man's name is David Hogg. I'm reading from his Wikipedia page. It goes like this. On February 26th, 2023, Hogg stated on Twitter that the individual, start quote, has no right to a gun, end quote. But rather, the Second Amendment is, start quote, about a state's right to have what is today the National Guard. The modern interpretation of 2A is a ridiculous fraud pushed for decades by the gun lobby, end quote. That's the quote from David Hogg. Now, the question for you: what is the impact of the new gun violence map app you have released? And if you could somehow provide some commentary, perhaps, on what David Hogg said.
1 second, let me just get here. You see my screen or no? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
love it. Dashboard.
So yeah, so this is a Esri dashboard that we created recently. And again, first off, one of the things before we like jump into it, because it is a very impactful and serious topic. I think acknowledging our partners and all the folks who do this work is really important. We've done work in California on this. We've done work in New York on this, and at the end of the day, I'm not here to be like, oh, everybody here, because I know you say you're moving to, et cetera, da da da. Like here in America, we have our rights, and so that's okay. Everybody can do whatever the hell they want. Okay, we'll see what happens. All right. Well, me, I like to report on what's actually happening, and when we see what's actually happening, like applications like this or maps or data like this, again, to me, that's where it becomes unacceptable, and we have too many folks who are getting impacted, and what we have here is an application that we created for the entire city of New York. Again, not just for the city agencies, but using city agency data. This is New York Police Department shooting data over the past 10 years. And we can look at a variety of different barometers. I just want to,
Yeah,
filter.
but this is so powerful because you had a number of 13,900 on the screen there. I'm quite certain that those that wrote the Second Amendment did not intend for there to be, as a result, nearly 14,000 shootings in the area you had on the map. It seems as though the intent of the Second Amendment was to create a National Guard before, there was one formally set up. So I just love, again, the power of data to just, in a stark terms, illustrate the results of a misinterpretation.
Right. And I think that's when we talk about a misinterpretation of a law, right? Let's take that to the work that we do. And I think I told somebody this the other day. I said, we like to, especially here in the States, talk about, oh, well, again, I work in communities that have been impacted by redlining for the past 20 years, that have been impacted by, right? And so when folks,
Sorry, hang on. I'll have to pull you up. What's redlining?
redlining is the disinvestment in certain communities, in urban areas, often lower income communities, communities of color, that has happened across the United States. And I work in communities who are still suffering the consequences of that to today. And so when we talk with urban planners or policymakers who want to talk about, or geographers and mappers who want to talk about the impact of redlining, I say, okay, I hear you, but as a geographer or as a map maker, are you doing anything different right now? Right?
Hang on.
Because
So, sorry, I have to interrupt you again. Why would there be the choice to disinvest in a community?
oh, I mean, for lots of reasons. I mean, to start here in the United States, I think we've seen that over and over again along racial lines. I think
Okay.
you've seen that clearly along racial lines in places like where I'm from, like Los Angeles,
Yeah.
in places like Chicago. You've seen that disinvestment to provide less access to healthy food, less
Wow.
access to loans. And of course, those things are all part of what actually builds up a community. If I'm a local community, or if you want to talk about other things like urban renewal, which was a period of time during the 60s where multiple neighborhoods, often communities of color, were decimated for additional road infrastructure,
Yeah.
additional.
Yeah.
And again, let's go back to the actual action of somebody drawing a line on a map and saying, this is a neighborhood that is not deemed worthwhile. This is
Yeah.
a neighborhood where we will not invest. So when we talk about that, that is great to have that historical context. But I think too many folks in our industry today do not understand that if they are not fully invested in community, then they have the opportunity to do the exact same thing. They may not think that their maps are as important or whatever it might be. But when we're talking about a neighborhood that just got flooded, when we're talking about a neighborhood that's been impacted by gun violence, when we're talking about neighborhoods that have been impacted, how much do you actually know about that neighborhood or community you're making a map of? And again, I'm not saying, oh, I know everything. No, not at all. I fall in this category as well. But it is about understanding how your maps and your data is actually only one representation of the world, and that is not the only one. And the more disconnected we are from that world, the more likely we are to make a mistake in visualizing that data or creating that data. And I have as well. So I don't want to come off as, oh, this is our whole profession, da da da. No, like I understand, and it is through those mistakes that I learned how to be a better organizer.
Yeah. Again, the theme of humility and sensitivity and ethics is really appreciated here. I'll return to my question. What is the impact of this new gun violence map app that you're showing us?
So this one in particular was, let me go. I'm gonna So that one is kind of at large, big picture. We have one that I think is probably answers your question a little bit better, is the work that we've done directly with folks in the Bronx. Because again, why is it more impactful? Because we have more stakeholders there. Because we have folks there who are interested in using. And let me just share the whole window. This is the problem. Not sharing the whole window. There we go. So let's talk about big picture, right? Because the app isn't going to do anything. The app is great, cool, good visualization, but let's talk about the big picture. And again, for us, it's about empowering communities through the data and through the technology. Cool, we've talked about that. One of the things we've also talked about is our community engagement. And so this is work that we've done at the Youth Gun Violence Reduction Summit with the Angela Yambo Foundation. You can see other stakeholders like the NYPD were there. We held it at the YMCA. This is, again, it's about who the stakeholders are, how are they being impacted. Here's our community mapping workshop with high school students in the Bronx. So, right, the app is just one piece of the whole puzzle. Here is the program in the Bronx, the Youth Violence Reduction Summit. Here's something not having to do with it at all, but still part about building community, right? We're talking about a back to school event where funds where backpacks and funds were donated to ensure that students had access to backpacks, food. We had a health clinic there. Again, that's not all us. That's the Angela Yambo Foundation, partners like the YMCA. They're the ones who made things like that happen. So when we have this kind of these building blocks, as you would say, right? That's those are the work in New York, and then we have our work in California as well. But in we talking about our work in the Bronx, New York, we have these building blocks. Then we're able to showcase students. Hey, tell us about your community. Tell us about what it is that you want to see different. Tell us about where there are issues in the neighborhood. And we heard a great resounding response from students about what they felt could be changed or how they could become actors in their community to make that change. And then we build applications that help. The first one is the one that you've seen already right there.
Wow.
But then
So something that came out of that engagement was gun violence, and then you had your way into introducing geospatial.
correct, yes, I guess that is a great way to put it. So in this case, right, to introduce geospatial, when we're working with maybe, you know, okay, when we work with K through 12, we can talk about geospatial in terms of STEM education, entrepreneurship, Other times it's more topically based, like this, where a topic comes to the top of the list, that is community safety. And so when we talk about community safety through our hand drawn maps, through our collaborations, through the programming that we have, then we're able to provide additional data that is then able to showcase community stakeholders, give them access to these data pieces so that then they can utilize this in conjunction, not in isolation, in conjunction with the other community organizing
Yeah.
tactics that they have, such as programming, such as talking to local law enforcement, such as talking with local officials. That is how, again, we build this comprehensive model.
Yeah. Okay. You're always coming back to, this being an ecosystem of interventions.
That's right. That's right. Because it is everybody, because everybody has a different role, and each of those stakeholders is a different perspective. Each of those stakeholders, if I'm a teacher, I'm going to care what my students are walking to and from school with. From if I'm a parent, I'm going to care about that too. But I'm also might not be able to care about that as much if I need to understand where we're getting food from. Right? There's these pieces, and again, we also one of the things I want to also say is that we don't focus on a deficit based approach. What we are try to be very realistic about what is going on in the community by understanding and listening. I always say, there are people asking, how do you do this work? I said, the first thing we do is shut up. As much as I'm talking right now, you probably don't think I can, but what we do is listen. We be quiet, we listen to what's going on. And in understanding that, we identify where the community assets are. Again, a lot of times the community assets are those people, are those leaders. And we have to figure out how we use our expertise to empower those leaders so they can do what they are already doing at scale or with more nuance, with more data, having data driven decision making. These are the ways that we try to empower those local leaders.
Right. I love the quick tour. As with all guests, now I have another 5 episodes worth of questions. But yeah, unfortunately, I'll have to display some discipline and just ask the remaining one. And it kind of relates, I think, to the message you've been building up. So if you were to hire an apprentice, what qualities would get them the job?
Awesome. I love this question. This is a great question. For me, it's about critical thinking. That is the top thing, right? I could teach somebody how to push the buttons, but we need somebody who's going to bring their perspective and their intuition and their critical thinking to the table. And for me, I've been a entrepreneur for a long time, and I need a hustler. I need somebody who's gonna hustle and go. Like, it's funny. I try to think. I'm talking to the young guys over in Detroit, and I'm like kind of recruiting them. Okay, we can work together. I have potential internships. I said, hey, I got no time to waste though. I need you to do. And if you want to come on board, like we can get it popping. Like I'm ready to go, because again, it's about there's a sense of enthusiasm and passion that needs to be there, right? It's not just okay, well, I made another map. No, what are we doing to improve the community? What are we doing to make a difference? How are we using the skills that we have to provide a service, to provide a resource to those around us? Because again, it is that ecosystem. If it's an ecosystem, somebody has definitely done that for us to thrive. And so we need to be able to do that for others to thrive. And if we all do that, we can build it together. And so for me, it's about having some critical thinking, having that hustle, having that passion. Those are the things that are needed. And I think all the rest can fall in line. You can learn stuff. You can learn stuff. But those intangibles are harder to learn. Or you
Yep.
could say they aren't able to be learned.
Sure. And I guess another way to put it is that you're putting yourself forward as someone who rewards those qualities.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Because when the event's happening and everybody's running around and trying to make sure this is happening, that's happening, somebody got two of their hands full or whatever, are you going to be over there standing around in the corner? Or are you going to be over there making sure that person has help and you're being a resource to them? Because again, we can't come into communities if we're going to sit on our hands. If we're going to come into communities, we need to be useful, and we need to be able to showcase that we're here to go the extra mile and go that extra step. And so
Yeah.
to me, it's also about leading by example. I think that's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah. Sure. Do you have another minute?
Yes. Yeah.
So I started off by mentioning this rather horrific example of animal rendering plant within 3 kilometers of a population center in the north of Serbia. and that I've used Ushahidi to create a mobile data collection app to begin to enable the community to illustrate the impact on their lives and businesses. So what would be the next step, do you think, that I could take, bearing in mind that I am flying there on Wednesday?
Interesting. I love it. I love it. So can you tell me a little bit? Now it's my turn to grill you with questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you set up. So obviously there was some kind of issue we understand that folks were all aware of, etc. You set up this platform. Do those potential stakeholders know about that platform and they know that is it accessible?
Yeah, so yeah, great question. So I spent a lot of time translating all of the items into the Serbo-Croat language. Um, and I have only gone as far as spreading the URL around family members, like on group chats. Because I'm not a great Serbo-Croat speaker, I haven't, and I'll, because I have a fear about my own credibility in front of them. For example, I put it on a local Facebook group, that, I might be obviously some foreigner who's, launching in and committing all the classic capacity building crimes. So yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know how to sort of begin that process.
Mm-hmm.
Something else to mention is that there is a friend of the family who's a delivery driver in that town, and I see him. We have a good friendship and a lot of rapport. I see him as someone who, because he goes around the city all the time, if he just makes reports all day long about the smell, where it is and isn't, he's a good start. And perhaps because he's quite a charismatic guy, he might be able to then propagate it amongst his network. But that's just a thought I had.
No, I think the comments you're worried about, how am I going to be received? Am I, as an out again, going back to the work that we've done, when I come into a community, I have to watch the way I move. And when I first worked in the Bronx, the first thing I said was, "Hey, thank you all for inviting me to your hood. Like, thank you for inviting me to your neighborhood, because that's something that is already a point of vulnerability, a point of openness, a point of willingness." And so, understanding that that's very fragile and understanding how to work with that, which is why what you're talking about, you need trusted community allies. And if he is a trusted community ally, then that's a one potential way to start. And again, I'm not all the way versed in some of the languages of the communities that I speak in, and that is a setback. And so it's important to take that upon ourselves to try to push ourselves to be more
I completely agree.
invested, uncomfortable, those kind of things. And again, that's not going to come overnight, though, right? And so, what, we let it sit on the shelf until we learn a language? No, not quite. We have to understand who those leaders are, who those folks are who are able to communicate and carry that both community kind of badge, and also to provide credibility and support, and also understand that they at some point can become that credible messenger where folks are able to say, "Oh, well, yeah, I know that person, that they're interested in improving our community. If that's
Yeah.
something that he's involved in, then maybe that's something I should look into." And then
Yeah.
that network, to your point, when you start to spread that network, trying to find other folks who are interested or involved in it. And again, when you're talking about reaching out to this gentleman, that is somebody who is a personal connection. That's great. But what about other organizations that care about the work that you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
what other organizations would care about this
Yeah.
exact issue?
So I really love this point that, yeah, Rich, and you said it already, empowering leaders that already have a stake in this issue. But so I have something. So there's a bit of a tragic background here. So there was already a very large community campaign led by a university professor who took the angle of, the impact on people's health, because the level of like the smell, you would not believe. And it's basically straightforward that there are negative health outcomes and child development, things like that. This guy died because of the stress, because there's a lot of political power that this factory has, and it's actually a multinational company. Um, so uh, so there's that history.
Yeah. And so when you're operating right, and that's again, unfortunately very common. I've organized for a long time, and not long, maybe long. Organized for a long time, and I've seen organizers get burned out, and I myself have been there. And it is a real situation when you're trying to work all the angles and make sure that you're empowering folks and supporting folks. And sometimes we put ourselves in the back seat. And I think multiple organizers that I've worked with, we've had to have that conversation about, hey, you got to take care of yourself. No good to anybody if you're not taking care of yourself. That kind of conversation. And it's always difficult for folks to do that. But what you're talking about, that happens in communities. And unfortunately, when those community leaders are unable to complete the work or support the work any longer, in short, that's victory for the other side. And that is where we have to have more of that capacity building and support to continue to make that kind of ripple effect, because it's not going to be any one of us that does it. It's going to be all of us collectively that
exactly. Yeah, shared leadership, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, yeah, I feel like I've got a few pointers there, and yeah, literally in a couple of days, look forward to taking those next steps. So thanks so much, Frank. This has been one of the best episodes. So it's so meaningful to me and all of our listeners, really, on so many levels. I think, as we all go through our corporate lives, often working for consultancies, we have in the back of our minds the broader impact and how to really bring the full benefit of our discipline to our community. So you're a leader there.
I appreciate it. This has been an excellent conversation. I'm so thankful that we're able to talk about the bigger picture and how we actually work with the people part, because I think we get lost in the technology side sometimes too much. And so I really appreciate this conversation. This has been fantastic. Thank you for having me.